Welcome to Dawn of the Clans. We are back in the main series at last, but this time far, far in the past. Because of that time shift, and with how conclusively Omen of the Stars ended, a lot of old fans didn't read this series upon release, and most new fans didn't start trickling in until the next main series arc. To this day, a lot of fans have skipped over this series entirely, or only know about it through secondhand sources. And because there have been so few first-hand opinions in the wild, any individual reading can drastically shift the arc's fan perception. 5 years ago, most people who knew Dawn of the Clans considered it one of the best arcs the series has ever made, but in the last couple of years, public opinion has shifted heavily towards the negative. This is new for me. The first 4 arcs have all been read about and spoken about to death, but Dawn of the Clans' reputation feels alive and fragile. So I'm going to do my best to give it its due diligence, both in highlighting its unique successes and in acknowledging its sometimes damning flaws. The Sun Trail was released on March 5th of 2013, slightly more than a month after Cloudstar's Journey, 5 months after Yellowfang's Secret, and almost a year since the last main series entry, The Last Hope. This book was written by Cherith Baldry, but the important shift in this case is not with the ghostwriter, but the editors. Following the end of Omen of the Stars, Victoria Holmes stepped back as the lead editor and creator of the series. And in the first part of this new arc, she was coaching them in how to take over the series. She didn't construct or lead this arc herself, but she was around to advise, making it a transitional time for the series both in the meta world and in the narrative. The allegiances here are very unique, as they only include one, relatively small group, the Cats of the Mountains. The only cat categorized among them is the tribe's healer, now called Stoneteller, but helpfully clarified to us as Half Moon, Jayfeather's connection from his travels into the past. Statistically, there are only 21 cats in this book's speaking cast, the smallest since the first 3 books of the first series, and despite that, the top 10 characters in that cast have only 70% of the lines, where the lowest we got in the first 3 books was Forest of Secrets at 81%. This combined with the fact that almost every cat in the top 10 cast has at least 50 lines shows us that this arc, more than any so far, is trying to build a rich community rather than putting most of the emphasis on the main characters. That is incredibly encouraging. However, as much as the statistics give me hope for this book's strengths, they also foreshadow its faults. 54% of the speaking cast is made up of she-cats, which is great, but all of those she-cats only manage to get 32% of the lines. This implies that, while there are a lot of female characters, the vast majority of the focus will be on the toms, and we'll just have to see how that plays out in the story. Narrative has more impact on representation than line count does in the end, so let's see what story this team managed to create. The prologue shows Half Moon looking desperately over her starving group. There's no food to be found, but with Jaywing's promise, she knows they must somehow stay here. At that point, she gets a vision of a warm, bright, rising sun, and realizes that some of her group, but not all of them, and not her, must head off to find new land, along the Sun Trail. Then the chapters open with our actual protagonist, Greywing. He is out trying to hunt with his brother, Clear Sky, who demonstrates a powerful leaping ability to take down a hawk. Greywing praises him, but Clear Sky immediately points out how scrawny the bird is. This won't solve the problem of their hunger. Greywing also suggests taking this back to the others in the cave, but Clear Sky takes a bite there, pointing out that they need strength too. Greywing is insistent that together, they can do anything. As they get back, they meet Turtletail, who fawns over Greywing in their catch, Brightstream, who fawns over Clear Sky in their catch, Shattered Ice, who wants to portion out the bird to whoever will be going out to hunt next, and Jagged Peak and Fluttering Bird, Quiet Rain's kits and Greywing and Clear Sky's younger siblings. Jagged Peak is fearless and eager to go out on his own one day. Stoneteller announces her vision, and that some of them must find a new land, led by Shaded Moss, a respected cat who was expected to be Stoneteller's successor. Some cats are immediately willing to go, while others find the idea terrifying or a surrender. Greywing, for his part, loves his home in the mountains, while Clear Sky sees no reason not to leave for better chances of survival and prosperity. Both of Quiet Rain's kittens are also eager to go, but Quiet Rain holds them back. Turtletail would like to go as well, and Clear Sky announces that Brightstream is coming, despite her verbal and physical hesitance, but Greywing still isn't convinced. Greywing apparently also liked Brightstream, but since she clearly likes Clear Sky, he isn't saying anything. They go out hunting so Brightstream can have some time to think about her decision, and Greywing manages to catch a hare with incredible speed. But as they arrive back, Fluttering Bird succumbs to her hunger and dies. Clear Sky arrives back too late to say goodbye to her and promises he won't let this happen again. Quiet Rain then tells Greywing to leave, for her, to make sure he and his kits don't die too. While the group discusses how to prepare for their journey, a she-cat named Dewy Leaf comes over to demand that Moonshadow stay, since she is having his kits and he promised he would stay with her. Moonshadow says that there isn't enough food to raise kits properly, but given his demeanor and the fact that he has no retort for why he specifically has to go when he has responsibilities here, it's obvious he's in the wrong. However, this spirals into a much larger group argument over whether it's responsible or noble or cowardly for any of them to choose to leave or stay. Stoneteller cuts off the argument, unsure about her decision to split up at all, and Lion's Roar suggests that they cast stones as they did when they left the lake. Greywing and Brightstream collect the stones and speak about whether or not to leave as they do, and then the vote begins. In addition to all the cats who wanted to leave, Lion's Roar, Quiet Rain, Greywing, and Brightstream all vote for cats to be allowed to leave. Dewy Leaf votes for them to stay, while swearing to Moonshadow that her kits will never know his name. A group will be leaving, but Greywing wants to stay to protect the cats here. Everyone says goodbye, and the traveling group sets off. Jagged is insistent on learning to hunt with Greywing, so he gives his brother an impromptu lesson, and they catch a hare together. The next morning, Jagged is missing, and with Misty Water's help in scent tracking, they discover that he is followed after the traveling cats. Quiet Rain is frantic and insists that Greywing go after him and protect him, which he agrees to. He says goodbye to everyone and offers Dewy Leaf a chance to come with him, which she decides against after some consideration. She just asks Greywing to pass on a wish for Moonshadow to be happy with his new home. Then Quiet Rain walks with him as far as she can before saying goodbye herself, and Greywing goes off on his own. Greywing finds Jagged just in time to save him from an eagle, and the pair set off together. Eventually, they find the other traveling cats, who are all happy to see them. Turtletail in particular notes how pleased she is to have Greywing along. The group as a whole banters easily as they travel, talk, and hunt, and Greywing takes time to point out the key personalities or strengths of many, like how Hawkswoop, Falling Feather, and her brother Jackdaw's Cry are the youngest besides Jagged how Tall Shadow and Moonshadow seem so opposite in personality despite being siblings, with one being quiet but insightful and the other being loud and, by Greywing's judgment, annoying, or how Dappled Pelt taught herself to catch fish in the pool by the waterfall, or how both she and Cloudspots know things about herbs. Brightstream is also expecting Clear Sky's kits, which she asks Greywing to keep a secret for now. An eagle attack drives the cats under a rock, but as the birds won't leave, Clear Sky suggests, or rather commands, everyone to fight the eagles. With Shaded Moss's permission, he splits up the group into a distraction and ambush team, with Greywing leading the former as the fastest cat among them. Shaded Moss asks Turtletail, Cloudspots, and Brightstream to accompany Greywing, and though Clear Sky protests on Brightstream's behalf, Shaded Moss points out that she's almost as fast as Greywing. The plan is carried out and almost works, but as Greywing looks back at Clear Sky, he trips on a root, and Brightstream doubles back to save him, which gives an eagle just enough time to haul her away, never to be seen again. Clear Sky initially wanted to go off and kill this eagle to get his mate back, but it's no use, and he is instead left upset with Greywing for, in some way, leading to her death. Greywing blames himself. The group mourns her briefly, but they all need to keep going. They soon make it to the edge of the mountains. Shaded Moss consoles Greywing over Brightstream's death, and everything seems to be going well, and they suddenly have too much food. They cross a thunderpath and find dogs, two-legs, and kitty pets in the two-leg place. None of them have ever met kitty pets, but based on the stories of their elders, they had heard that these cats have thistledown for brains. Greywing doesn't think that could be true in a place as dangerous as this, and he is proven right when kitty pets fiercely attack Moonshadow in the group. I, however, am instead thinking about how few kitty pets there are at the lake in the ancient time or in the modern day, and how it is that these mountain cats who spent so little time around any other living creatures have already grown the xenophobic preconceptions that cats have in the rest of the main series. At least this misconception was immediately proven false with the first kitty pets they came across, so surely they won't continue to harbor this specific prejudice. Another rogue points them towards the area past Highstones, where he says cats live already. But as they travel in that direction, Shaded Moss is killed by a monster on the Thunderpath, which devastates his daughter, Rainswept Flower, though the whole group mourns him, and they are able to bury him, unlike Brightstream. Clear Sky adds her name to the burial, and they are able to honor both fallen tribe mates. After traveling a little further and crossing one more large thunderpath, they come across a land of long grasses, trees, and rivers that is appealing to all of the cats on the journey, and that could be their new home. A few days into their stay, Greywing runs into a couple of rogues named Wind and Gorse while out hunting, and they're less than happy to have new cats in the area stealing their prey. Tall Shadow appears to stop Greywing from aggravating them further and tell them to leave, under threat of force. When Tall Shadow orders everyone to avoid hunting alone anymore, she admits that Shaded Moss made her his successor before he died. We don't know if this is true or not, but no one challenges her. At Turtletail's suggestion, Greywing finally goes to talk to his brother about Brightstream, and he ends up saving Clearsky from falling into the gorge, declaring that he won't let him die too. He apologizes for Brightstream, and Clearsky admits that he actually blames himself, since he created the plan to fight the eagles in the first place. The brothers make up, explore the territory, and meet hostile cats. Neither brother is really put off by the conflict, though, with Clearsky taking pride in being feared for safety's sake, and Greywing pointing out that they'll need to get along with cats here if they want to stay. Moonshadow and Tall Shadow have been getting into arguments a lot, as Tall Shadow has been leading the group and telling people to stay out of the forest, where most of the other cats are, and Moonshadow doesn't like being told what to do. Swoop points out that all Moonshadow does is argue, and everyone is sick of it. The next day, Moonshadow goes into the forest again, gets himself attacked, and needs to be saved by the rest of the group. Tall Shadow gets angry with him for disobeying her order again, and Moonshadow says that it's stupid to stay in the hollow because the forest has more prey. Tall Shadow allows them to start hunting, but it has to be with multiple cats. So Clearsky goes forest hunting with Moonshadow the next day, while Greywing and Turtletail walk to what will become 4 trees. There, they met a kitty pet named Bumble, with whom they share a friendly conversation before leaving to go hunt. Clearsky did especially well in hunting, chasing a squirrel up a tree, and on the way back they catch Wind, the rogue from earlier, going straight down into a tunnel to chase a rabbit, which she shows Greywing how to do when he asks. Dappled, Pelt, and Cloudspots go to fetch herbs, with Dappled Pelt also figuring out how to swim in the river, and when they arrive back, Turtletail is sharing a vole with Bumble. Turtletail invites her to live with them, but Bumble refuses and instead asks if they'd like to visit her househook, which they politely decline. Greywing then privately tells Turtletail to not get too friendly with kitty pets. That night, foxes attack, and though they fend them off, the experience showed them that they really need to practice fighting techniques rather than just relying on strength and numbers. Moonshadow uses this as an excuse to demand that they move to the woods, and as the discussion is split, Tall Shadow asks them to cast stones. Only Moonshadow, Clearsky, Quickwater, Falling Feather, and Jagged Peak wanted to move, but Clearsky says the 5 of them should be able to leave on their own. Tall Shadow tells them to go with their blessing, and return whenever they want. Turtletail is visiting Bumble, which makes Greywing shocked and upset, and the forest cats have been getting to know the rogues in the area, even inviting them to stay. Greywing meets one of the rogues, a sharp-witted silver-tabby she-cat. He then tries to hunt with Turtletail to show her how nice the wild can be, but when she misses a catch, he gets upset at her for it. She goes off to spend time with Bumble instead, and she doesn't come back that night. When Greywing goes out to search for her, he runs into the same rogue, who introduces herself as Storm and shows him to Bumble's den. He says he's come to rescue Turtletail, and she says she doesn't need to be rescued. She only stayed overnight because it was raining. Turtletail and Greywing apologize to each other on their way home for their tones, but neither have changed their minds. Storm also gets attacked, and Greywing intervenes on her behalf before introducing her to his friends on the moor. After talking, Storm even agrees to show him around the forest the next day. Oh, and Jackdaw's Cry and Swoop appear to be becoming mates, and Greywing is becoming friendlier with Wind and Gorse, which Tall Shadow disapproves of quietly. Greywing also fully apologizes to Turtletail for trying to control her life and being so suspicious, and she appreciates it. However, when he says he needs to go out and meet Storm, she is hurt. Greywing forgets about this as he meets Storm, and she shows him around, culminating in Greywing introducing her to Clearsky since he's nearby. They discover that a rogue named Fox is patrolling Clearsky's area, and Greywing has to ask permission to see his brother. Clearsky and Storm are immediately taken with each other, and Storm promises to come visit again soon, having forgotten Greywing completely. Greywing still waits for her, and even inadvertently turns down Turtletail as he admits that he wants to invite Storm into their group, but she never shows up. Tall Shadow instead takes him aside to ask if she should invite Wind and Gorse to stay with them. She decides to give herself time to think about it first. Storm comes back for a quick visit, but isn't very interested in the moor. Turtletail has been spending more time with Bumble and points out how disinterested Greywing is in her, which Greywing somehow takes as an invitation to talk about how wonderful Storm is, and Turtletail gets upset. She takes him aside and says she's going to live with Bumble, and Storm tells Greywing that she's going to live with Clear Sky. A while later, the forest has been getting more militant and not allowing the moor cats to come and visit, so Greywing goes over to talk to his brother. Clear Sky has set up boundaries with regular patrols to keep other cats from stealing their prey, and has also been overly protective of Storm as she's pregnant, which she does not appreciate. Also, Jagged Peak fell from a tree, and though Dappled Pelt does what she can, he is left with a bad limp. Also, Rainswept Flower and Shattered Ice show an interest in the tunnels, and found a hollow that could better protect them on the moor. Jagged Peak shows up at camp and says that Clear Sky kicked him out of the group since he can't contribute anymore with his injury. He's taken in, of course, but everyone's opinion of Clear Sky is degrading fast, and Greywing goes to confront him. Clear Sky explains that he had to do it for the good of his group. Greywing later catches a piece of prey in the woods, and Fox attacks him, pinning him down, digging into his head, and nearly blinding him while Clear Sky watches. Desperate, Greywing lunges forward and Fox is thrown off, but dies as well. Clear Sky is furious that he killed a cat just for doing his job, says he has no brother, and throws Greywing out of his territory. Storm decides to leave for the Two-Leg place, not liking the way Clear Sky handles his cats or her, and directly blaming him for Fox's death. Clear Sky is slightly more emotional, enough to ask about Jagged Peak, but he is determined to leave both him and Storm in the past so he can focus on the responsibility to his cats. Another while later, Greywing visits the Two-Leg place, meets Turtletail again, and is reluctantly escorted to Storm's home. She is determined to be independent and shut him and Clear Sky out of her life. But almost immediately, the house is torn down by a monster and Storm and her kits are all killed, despite her best efforts. Only one kit survived, a big orange tom that Turtletail suggests they name Thunder. Greywing introduces him to Clear Sky and explains what happened, but Clear Sky is so distraught over his inability to protect Storm that he can't stand being responsible for his kit. Greywing is so disgusted to see him turn on his family like this that he officially splits off from Clear Sky and instead takes Thunder to the moor, saying that Greywing will be his father. So, we have a lot to talk about, and I'll preface with the fact that, as ever, I am only focusing on one book at a time in this series. If I say a character is characterized well, with interesting setup, for example, that doesn't mean that the characterization will be maintained or that the setup leads to a well-executed arc. I say this specifically for this cast because there's an awful lot of feelings around them at this point. So let's start with a basic point. For anyone who read the field guides, a lot of these names and profiles will sound similar. Greywing the Wise, a famous strategist from WindClan, Cloudspots and Dappled Pelt, who will be the first medicine cats of ThunderClan and RiverClan respectively, Tall Shadow, the lithe black she-cat with a name and appearance similar to Shadowstar, and Wind, a wiry brown rogue who sounds a lot like Windstar, all make appearances. A lot of cats in this book are also already showing signs of preferences that will eventually lead them to clans, such as Clear Sky's skillful leaps that point him out as a SkyClan cat, perhaps their leader given how he has positioned himself as the leader of the forest. All of this foreknowledge will have you keeping an eye out for every clan trait or prey preference you see cats display, which is always fun as a reader. Besides the foreshadowing, though, this book spends most of its runtime as a traveling book, something that has, historically, in Warriors been very, very boring. But this book captivates me the whole way through. Why is that? Well, it's mainly because of the characterization. Stories that are light on plot, such as traveling books, give ample time to introduce or flesh out a cast in their personalities, values, goals, strengths, and relationships. And the Sun Trail does this in full force. So many cats have extremely consistent and rich personalities, which both suit their roles well and play uniquely off surrounding characters. Having a wise and respected senior warrior wouldn't make someone special in Omen of the Stars, where half the adult cast are all that by default, but in a cast specially designed for this series, they could make every character unique and let Shaded Moss stand out. When he disappears, the easy leadership disappears with him. Having a boisterous and eager young Tom wouldn't be unique in any arc with a group of kits or young apprentices, but Jagged Peak is our only example in Dawn of the Clans, meaning he gets to stand out in that role and demonstrate how that archetype can change through his experiences. Greywing is happy enough to work with others and humble enough to recognize other strengths, so he actually gets to point out for us just how unique each of the traveling cats are, and we see those strengths reinforced through action. The characterization in this book is some of the best the series has ever had, but the book as a whole still isn't perfect. Through the plot and characters' reactions, we can see some accidental themes forming which detract from the book's message and the reader's experience. The mountain cats decided they couldn't live in their home anymore, so they ventured out into a new land that already housed plenty of cats. Not only that, but they refused multiple previous possibilities for homes along the way that didn't have cats competing with them, because they assumed the forest territory to be a more plentiful place, if it could support so many cats. And then some of them left their relatively unchallenged place on the moor to go into the forest itself, where most of the existing cats already lived, since there was better prey. Note that pretty much as soon as they left the mountains, these cats were spoiled with too much prey, more than they could eat. And the locals who did grow up in this area consistently show hostility or fear towards the new trespassers. By the end of this book, the cats that aren't still hostile are either integrated into a mountain group, or the mountain cats are considering inviting them in. In this light, the mountain cats do create a significant allegory to colonizers prevalent in human history, who invaded new land that was already inhabited, shoved out or converted the native population, and could never be satisfied with enough land or resources to survive, instead pressing deeper and deeper into the lands they came to. This was obviously a very harmful practice, and paints the mountain cats, who are currently all of our protagonists, in a very negative light. This isn't a message the book is trying to convey, but because its tropes and character choices mirror real history so strongly, it's easy for a reader to be put off by the accidental support of colonization. And this isn't helped by the book's general portrayal of xenophobia. As I mentioned, it seems extremely weird for these cats to already have such specific negative stigmas about kitty pets, considering they didn't meet any before, and every kitty pet they meet here is competent. If anything, these cats should respect and want to distance themselves from kitty pets in the same way they already want to distance themselves from rogues, simply mistrusting anyone who wasn't from the mountains and doesn't have loyalty to their group. This is how Tall Shadow's xenophobia seems to be working out, and I think that's a much better incarnation so far. Besides a few errant comments coming from other former mountain cats, in this specific book, the really bad xenophobia comes almost exclusively from okay, let's talk about Greywing. So he is a very interesting character thus far. He's not interested in the primary story of expansion and fighting for survival as most other cats in this traveling group were. Instead, he's motivated by his relationships. He loves his brothers and tribe mates deeply, taking note of their strengths and honoring them no matter their age, weaknesses, or behavior. However, he isn't great with relationships, particularly when it comes to his own feelings. He's friendly, patient, and is not nearly as suspicious of strangers as many cats are, but when he is personally antagonized, or when his feelings of love or jealousy are involved, he can be very ignorant and or lash out with anger, pettiness, or just rude comments that he might not even recognize in the moment. His xenophobia towards kitty pets seems almost exclusively targeted towards Bumble, and in that case, it's very obviously because he is upset that Turtletail, a cat who has always shown interest in him, is drawing away from him and finding a new friend. He may already love Turtletail and not recognize that as the source of his jealousy, or he may have just gotten used to her presence and be upset that it is disappearing. But he has no real grievances with Bumble herself. All of this makes up a unique profile for a Warriors protagonist, and as it is now, I'm happy to have it. He's a generally good cat with a more grounded perspective who can nevertheless say and believe very wrong things due to a lack of introspection rather than intuition of others. At the moment, his flaws are being framed as flaws, with other characters becoming upset at him or pointing out how clueless he can be. And that narrative framing provides the opportunity for growth across the series. Our other major character is Clear Sky. He isn't a point-of-view character, but he clearly has a large role to play in this book and the upcoming story. He and Greywing do, or should I say did, care for each other, but they have almost polar opposite personalities and value systems that are driving them further and further apart. Where Greywing is very passive and patient, getting his few leader-like moments from careful and tactical planning, Clear Sky is extremely active, taking initiative in nearly every situation and rallying cats together under his passionate ideas. Clear Sky is also obviously motivated by fear, of starvation, of cats he loves dying, and of unknown dangers that he can't predict. It's outlined clearly that starvation was a constant threat since he was a kitten, and that the subsequent deaths of Fluttering Bird, Bird Flight, Shaded Moss, and eventually Storm all had large impacts on his sense of safety going into the future. When he says he's doing this for the group, he means he's trying to control the lives of as many cats as he can handle to stop them from ever running out of or being cheated out of food, even now that they're in a much more plentiful land. He also reacted to these deaths by shutting off his emotions, not letting himself show favoritism to cats he genuinely loves in case they leave him or die. It's easier to kick Jagged Peak out than to see him die under Clear Sky's rule when he can't hunt for himself. It's easier not to raise Thunder at all, since he's a constant reminder that Storm couldn't stand the cat he was, and that she died as soon as she left Clear Sky's bubble of safety. He's hurting the very cats he's motivated to protect, but it's not because he has no compassion or is pure evil like Broken Star. This cat has obviously been traumatized, from birth and repeatedly since. As a result, he has formed his entire personality around self-defense, and with it, the defense of anyone around he feels capable of protecting. Now, that isn't to say that he is a good cat at all. Preventing family from seeing each other, creating a culture where murder for crossing borders is expected, smothering Storm, exiling Jagged Peak for receiving an injury, and refusing to raise his son are all very bad deeds. And he does, at this point, look like the best candidate to be the arc's main antagonist. That being said, if that is to be the case, then Clear Sky is very unique among Warrior's antagonists, because he began with traits resembling a protagonist, and has both clear, emotional ties to our protagonists and complex motivations and fears behind his behavior, meaning it's actually possible for him to redeem himself one day, if he learns to introspect and be honest with his feelings enough to acknowledge the harm he has done and start making it up to cats he hurt. Unfortunately, this is a lesson that our protagonist, Greywing, can't teach him, as he also distances himself from his emotions and isn't good at introspection, albeit in a more passive and polite way. Both of these toms have a lot of well-constructed characterization and potential for rich character arcs, and the characterization of the cast as a whole is very strong. But there is a problem popping up here that, we can only hope will get better in future books. She-cats. Now, unlike in the original arc, the issue here isn't that she-cats aren't characterized well or in a varied way. We have everything from Half Moon's wise and careful demeanor to Tall Shadow's grounded and guarded leadership, to Turtletail's open heart, to Storm's sharp tongue, to Birdflight's cautious but brave nature, and even Bumble's fearless kindness. The she-cats here are all well-characterized, consistent, and utilized effectively for their unique narrative roles in just the same way the toms are. However, a pattern is emerging with the kinds of narrative roles they are given. This starts early with the portrayal of Dewyleaf, Moonshadow's mate, who is shown as hysterically upset to have her mate leave her and her unborn kits with no good excuse. We do see her calm down later and decide to raise her kits alone while wishing Moonshadow happiness. But this doesn't change the fact that Greywing never decided to stick up for Dewyleaf or console her, save for inviting her to come and join her terrible mate again. The dissonance between framing and characterization is not as bad here as it is in other relationships of the series, because Dewyleaf does end her arc with a calm dignity, while Moonshadow is blatantly called annoying and is characterized as an irresponsible jerk who picks fights with other cats and even his sister. The book isn't claiming this to have been a good relationship or Moonshadow a good cat, but Dewyleaf was still forced to shoulder the burden of his bad behavior, a pattern that continues with Birdflight. She does not like jumping into things without giving herself time to think, and really enjoyed the idea of staying in the mountains. But Clear Sky answered for her that she would be coming on the journey, and though she was upset, she eventually accepted this because she loves and wants to be with him. Now, Clear Sky speaking for others and assuming their choices is consistent across all his relationships, but again, Birdflight's story is continuing a pattern of toms getting to make choices for a relationship and she-cats only having the option to react to those decisions. And of course, Birdflight being one of 2 she-cats in this book to have the exact narrative role of being loved by both Clear Sky and Greywing, loving Clear Sky in return, and then dying in proximity to both toms to make them sad and drive them apart is another worrying pattern. Greywing isn't blameless in the relationship department either. Turtletail very clearly loves him from the outset, and whether or not he actually reciprocates, he never acts on any feelings he has for her and instead fawns over other romantic prospects in front of her, while jealously lashing out at anyone else who Turtletail shows interest in. He is cruel to her and Bumble, and though he does apologize to Turtletail for trying to control her choices, he doesn't internalize why he acted this way or why his behavior around Bumble was so rude. Both Turtletail and Bumble are shafted to the sides of their own story so that we can tell the really important story about Greywing being unconsciously jealous of a cat he won't admit to liking. And then we have Storm. She is a sharp-witted, talented, independent she-cat. However, as soon as she sees Clear Sky, the oldest cliche in the book plays out as they each go speechless. She forgets about even having a friendship with Greywing, and off-screen she falls madly in love and is having his kittens. She makes a half-hearted defense of Clear Sky's behavior when he kicks out Jagged Peak, and she finally leaves him when Greywing was forced to kill Fox on Clear Sky's policies. But past this, we only get to see one scene of her trying to be independent before she dies and asks Greywing to tell Clear Sky she's sorry. Sorry for what? For leaving him when he was acting like a jerk to her and everyone else around him? Or for dying and leaving him with the unbearable responsibility of being a Tom and participating in the raising of a child? For as driven and independent as her character was set up to be, Storm is an object in her own story to be acted upon by the real agents of Greywing and Clear Sky, which is unfortunately how most of these she-cats are portrayed. The exception here would seem to be Tall Shadow, who isn't involved in any love shenanigans or jealousy fallout. However, despite being the leader of the group, she has a quiet and guarded personality that keeps her to the background more often than not. She wants to be sure she's making the right decision and handling her power responsibly, but her desires to not cause conflict within the group and keep them safe have already caused her to be at odds with her volatile brother, Moonshadow, and to allow the group to split off to the forest. In most big decisions she makes, she looks to what Shaded Moss, the wise old Tom leader that no one questioned, would do, and she defers part of her judgment to the opinionated or wise cats around her. Since those cats are currently Clear Sky, Moonshadow, and Greywing, that means she is again a she-cat character working as a bit of an object in the real stories of the Toms. Maybe part of this problem could be solved if we got more point-of-view characters in the next books, such as giving us a look inside Tall Shadow's head as she leads, or giving us Turtletail's perspective on her friendships and relationships, or showing us Wynn's life as a rogue with her stable relationship to Gorse, and her outside perspective on the xenophobia of the mountain cats. But all of that is only a possibility now, in 2013, as this book comes out. In any case, this is still a very good book. It uses the strengths of its format, genre conventions, cast size, and brand new time period more than any previous Warriors book has, and develops a rich and varied cast that I'm eager to spend more time exploring, along with some clever intrigue about how all of the clan history and figures we're aware of will come to be. This book alone, not taking into account the future, stands as one of my favorite books in the series, beating out even The Forgotten Warrior, and were it not for its issues with unintentional messaging about she-cats and xenophobia, it might have reached even my very top spot. But that is only on my ongoing list, as coming up, we have a super edition that may contend that spot, which I am very excited to delve into when we return for the next episode of our trip through time.